What's up, UX fam? How's your mom and them? Welcome to another episode of Beyond UX Design. I'm Jeremy. If you're new here, welcome to the show. I am super stoked to have you. The Beyond UX Design shop is open. Head on over to beyonduxdesign.com/shop to pick up some big, beautiful art prints of some of my favorite UX and software-related quotes, or pick up some digital downloads and print them yourself. Pick up your copy of Beyond UX Design, master your craft beyond pixels and prototypes. Get free shipping on all orders over $30 and use the code LISTENER to get 10% off your entire order. Head on over to beyonduxdesign.com/shop and get your print on. This week's episode is brought to you by Wix Studio. If you're thinking about redoing your portfolio or kicking off a new website project, listen up. I only have 30 seconds to tell you about Wix Studio, the web platform for agencies and enterprises. So here are a few things that you can do from start to finish in 30 seconds or less on Studio. You can adapt your designs for every device with responsive AI. You can jump seamlessly between front end and back end. You can speed up projects with an AI code assistant. You can start a design library, reuse full stack apps and UI components across multiple sites. So time's up, but the list keeps going. Step into Wix Studio and see for yourself. Head on over to beyonduxdesign.com/Wix to start creating today. This week's episode is brought to you by Backlog, a community of designers building their businesses together. If you've been dreaming of escaping the 9-to-5 and building your own business, Backlog is the community for you. Backlog brings together hungry designers turned entrepreneurs, all working to grow their freelance gigs, content, digital products, and design agencies. Join a network of like-minded folks sharing tactics, strategies, and systems to help you succeed. Head on over to beyonduxdesign.com/backlog and become part of a community that's building their businesses together. Don't wait. Find your path to independence with Backlog. And if you haven't done it already, please consider subscribing to the show wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you are a regular here and you feel like you're getting something out of the show, I would really appreciate you leaving a 5-star review. That'll help me out so much more than you know. And as always, thanks so much to Chris, Siraquan, Stacy, Radu, Megan, Andrew, John, Mark, Kevin, Jason, Michelle, and Marty for all their support. And if you want to join these fine folks and many others and help keep the show independent and ad-free, you'll get rough transcripts and exclusive access to the entire video library of episodes, including episodes before they're even released. And you can get instant access right now for as little as $5 a month. And for more information on how you can support the show and help more people find out about what we're doing, make sure to check out beyonduxdesign.com/support. And of course, if you think the show is worth sharing, then I would love it if you told your mom and them about it. So, if you're a junior designer, or not even a junior designer yet, you're trying to be a junior designer, you're even sub-junior, you got this weird catch-22. You need a job to get experience, but you also need experience to get a job. What do you do? Where do you start? How do you even, I don't even know. I can't even wrap my head around that. I've got my good buddy Mitch Clements on today, and Mitch has been recently looking for interns on his team. And so he's going to provide some insights into what he was looking for and how he found the perfect intern for his team. So we're going to talk about that today. I'm really excited. Mitch is a senior product design manager at nCino, where he's built a design team from 2 to 30 designers, and he's helped the mortgage business unit grow from a startup to a $1.2 billion industry leader. Mitch, I hope you got a small fraction of that as a bonus for your help. And with a diverse career background as a developer, product manager, and designer, Mitch brings a unique perspective and leadership to product vision, strategy, storytelling, and building design teams. Mitch is deeply passionate about fostering the design community. Mitch is deeply passionate about fostering the design community and regularly makes appearances as a speaker at design conferences and shares his thoughts regularly on LinkedIn. So if you're not following Mitch, go do that right now. Mitch enjoys speaking on a variety of topics, including helping designers level up in their careers, design leadership, and demonstrating the business value of design. Mitch, welcome to Beyond UX Design, episode 100. I am so excited to have you on as my 100th episode. I was going to say guest, but I haven't had 100 guests. But anyway, welcome to Beyond UX Design. I'm so excited to finally get you on the show. How's it going, man?
It is going great. Thank you so much for that incredible intro. And it is such an honor to be here. I'll be honest, I haven't done any work to be the 100th guest, so that's really all on you. But I'm very honored to be here. Thank you.
No, man, I'm excited to have you. I have been, you and I were talking about this. I've been wanting to have you on for forever. And I have this crazy backlog of episodes. And I was like, if I wait to ask Mitch, he's never going to come on. So I just need to get him on. And it happened to be 100. And I was like, you know what? I'm excited to have Mitch. Mitch will be 100. I don't have any other ideas for like 100th episode, so this is it. I'm celebrating with you. So you're
Well, I'm
very you're
excited to
very
be
lucky to be
here.
here.
I've been a long time listener. I love the show. I love
Thanks, man.
all the insights shared, and yeah, it's just an honor to be here. Thank you.
Right on. Well, likewise, I have been following you for some time now. You're probably one of the first people I found on LinkedIn when I started taking LinkedIn more seriously, doing the content and stuff. So I've been following you for quite a while as well. So anyway, the feeling is mutual, Mitch. The feeling is mutual. All right, so I talked about the bio a little bit, but you have been hiring an intern recently and growing your design team, but specifically you were looking for some interns. And so I want to just talk a little bit about all that today, your experience, what you were looking for, what stood out, what didn't, maybe some pitfalls, things that people were doing. But before we get into that, Mitch, I'm excited to have you join us for a live event because I feel like this is going to be one of those topics where we're going to have thousands and thousands of questions. Maybe not that many. I don't think that many people even listen to the show. But we're going to have a lot of questions. So we're going to be hanging out, answering questions next week, October 25th at 11 Eastern. And you're going to be answering some questions. Why don't you tell everybody a little bit about maybe what you want people to ask about, some things that you want people to ask you before, and we'll set up an event. I'm going to have an events page, beyonduxdesign.com/events, where you can submit questions. Tell everybody listening what kinds of things you want to answer.
Yeah, really, I'm happy to answer any and all questions. I know these kind of topics of how do I break into UX design, product design, this is where I see the most questions, where I see the most passion and energy of how do I optimize my portfolio? Do I need a portfolio? How do I get experience without experience? How do I stand out? Any question is fair game, and I am excited and happy to answer any of them. Like many entry level designers, I was in your shoes one day. I was asking those same questions, trying to find those answers. I was in that looming state of, I don't know if I'm good enough. How do I do this? How do I navigate this? And those are the kinds of things I love mentoring and helping designers figure out.
Right on. All right, cool. So make sure to check out beyonduxdesign.com/events. We'll have a link there with a form, and you can submit your questions early. If you get those questions in early, we can't guarantee that we'll answer the questions, but we'll do our best. Or you can ask the questions in the chat live during the event as well. But check out beyonduxdesign.com/events and make sure to sign up and hang out with us on Friday, the 25th of October at 11 Eastern. So Mitch, I'm excited to have you do that. That's going to be a lot of fun. So tell us a little bit about you. I know I read that bio a little bit, but tell us a little bit about your journey. You've done some really interesting developer, product manager, design leader. I don't know, we could probably talk for a long time just about that, but I'm curious, like that evolution seems really interesting. How'd you navigate that?
Yes, my career journey has been anything but linear. As you mentioned, I've been a developer, I've been a product manager, I've been a designer, but I started my career as a developer, an engineer. I was getting a bachelor's degree in computer science at my university. Halfway through, I discovered this thing called UX, got really excited about it, very passionate about it, but it wasn't a major at my university. And back then, there weren't nearly as many boot camps or certificates as there are today. And so I wasn't even sure if it was a real job. I thought it was just like a skill set that front end
Yeah.
engineers needed to have, or you needed to like be a graphic designer, one or the other. And so I started an internship as a mobile Android developer at a small basement startup. I was employee number 17 at this little company in a basement, and that company had a UX consultant. And I was so excited, like meeting a real live UX designer in the flesh. And I wanted to be involved as much as possible in their work. So I was trying to be super diligent, get all my coding work done every day so I could go help this UX designer with research, with wireframing, with visual design, because the usability and the user experience of our product really lacked. And so it was exciting to be able to make an impact that way. Well, by the end of this internship, I was actually doing more UX design work than actual coding, what I was
Oh,
hired for. And by the end of the internship, they offered me a full-time job as a software developer. And I countered the offer. I asked for a full-time role as a UX designer, which I was
Wow. Okay.
terrified. Like, can I even do that as an intern?
Yeah.
I'd been given this job opportunity on a silver platter, and I was so nervous, but I just knew by the end, like, that's what I was passionate about. And they said yes.
Nice,
And
man.
so I started my career as a designer. Partway through, I became a product manager. I got really passionate about the why. Why are we prioritizing what we're prioritizing? Why are we building what we're building? What's the business rationale? So took a detour as a product manager, realized I really appreciated that skill set, but my ultimate passion was in design. So I stuck with the design path and my career grew as this company grew. I've been there over 7 years now. Today, we're 1,700 employees. It has exponentially grown. I started as, 1.5 designers. We're now 30 designers.
That's
And
amazing.
it's just been a exponential growth journey.
I love it, man. So that was nCino where you started out as the intern?
Yeah, so originally it was
Wow.
called
Okay.
Simple Nexus. We got acquired several years ago. I'm still in the same business unit, but yeah, now part of a more global enterprise and keep building the design team.
That's awesome, man. Well, I just want to call out something that you said when you first kind of heard about it. You thought it was a skill set. You thought it was sort of a mindset. And I think that's actually, as we're talking about junior designers and getting a job, I think that's a really key thing to think about because when I think about UX versus UI versus, user research versus, even product management, I see these as jobs to be done. Someone's got to do the job.
Yeah.
And what your title is and what things you're asked to do, those can change based on the company, but there are jobs to be done if you want to build great software. And so I do see that as sort of it's a mindset. And it's interesting because you've done this. You've, software engineer, UX, product manager, now, design leader. Those things and those concepts and those mindsets can stay with you, even if your title isn't quote unquote UX designer or whatever it is, right? And so I don't know
Yeah.
that I'm curious what your thought there. I'm curious if you have any additional insights, but I just think that's such a great insight, and I think that's something that a lot of junior designers think UX is just a bunch of action. It said this is my title, no one should do it but me, and I'm the only one, blah blah blah, who can do this thing. And I don't know. I just see that as like a pitfall out of junior designers. I don't know if that's something. Maybe we're
Yeah.
jumping ahead a little bit, but I'm curious
It's
what you think.
interesting because in the industry, especially if you go like online on LinkedIn or other communities, people seem so passionate to put everyone in boxes and labels. Like, oh, you're a UX designer. That means you can't do the UI
Right.
design.
Exactly.
Or, oh, you're a product manager. That means you can't talk to users and do research, which is
Mm-hmm.
mind-boggling to me. Like,
Right.
and I get it, there's some concerns there of, someone who's not good in a skill set,
Right.
if they're doing research, they might be doing bias research. Like there are some valid arguments, but I do take a very fluid mindset of, if you learn about each of these disciplines, that's going to make you better no matter what you do. You're going to be a better
Yeah.
collaborator. You're going to be a more
Yeah.
creative thinker. And I especially love, the beauty of startup environments where I started my career is, as you mentioned, those jobs need to be done. But
Mhm.
we didn't have a dedicated UX researcher. We didn't even have enough
Right.
UX designers. Like my title was developer, but I saw this need for the company. We needed more research. We needed more design work. We needed more strategic thinking. So instead of asking for permission, I just went out and learned those skills. I went out and practiced them and did them to help bring value to the company, to help bring value to the users. And so I'm just a big believer of, do what brings value. Like forget the labels, forget the titles, focus on the skills that bring value.
Yeah, I love that, man. So let's talk a little bit about the skills that bring value because there is this catch 22, like we talked about. It's hard to get the skills without a job, but you can't get a job without the skills. And so a lot of these junior designers are caught in this, this sort of catch 22. And when I think a lot about, boot camps, especially, a lot of designers are coming through boot camps, not even close to real world experience. And it's not the fault of the boot camps. It's how do you teach real world experience in 6 months when someone doesn't know anything start to finish? So I'm just talking a little bit about that. I'm curious, like, how do you advise, people that you coach, people that you mentor, getting this experience before you have a job or getting a job without experience, what are some things that you tell people when they ask this question?
Yeah, so this is the number one question I get from entry-level designers. A lot of people feel very frustrated at the market. There's not enough entry-level roles. And yeah, that total, chicken or egg catch 22 situation. What comes first, the chicken or the egg? The experience or the job? Unfortunately, the reality we live in is companies are the ones answering that question, and it's often not up for debate. They've already made up their minds. You need experience to get that entry level job,
Hmm.
which sucks. I get it. It's not fair. It doesn't feel right. But that's the reality we live in, and I don't see that changing anytime. It was that way for me 8 years ago. It's probably going to stay that way. That's just the reality we live in. And if that frustrates you, this might not be the right career path for you. I hate to say it, but it's not an easy career path to break into. And so then the real question becomes, okay, how do I get that experience to help me get the job? And the answers are infinite. Volunteering, freelancing, consulting, internships, mentorship, participating in hackathons, creating case studies, attending boot camps, getting certificates, networking, writing, blogging, job shadowing, engaging in the design community, reframing your past experience and skills. Those are all ways you can communicate your passion for UX design, for product design. Those are all things that can help you create comparable experience. And every one of those things I listed, you can put that in your resume. You can put that on your LinkedIn profile. You can put that in your portfolio. And that's what I had to do to break into the design discipline. A lot of people, you'll hear about case studies, starting a project. Before landing my first job, I designed and built a mobile app that solved a problem for my local community. And I poured over 100 hours into that app. This was all during a single summer. I was working a full-time job, 8 hours a day, and in the evenings, I was just dedicating my time and energy to designing this solution, to building it, to creating a solution to pain points I was seeing for my users. And that became my best portfolio piece. That project I dedicated so much time and effort into. I also got very active and involved in the design community. At the university I was attending, there was a local UX design club. I was the most active participant attendant. And when it came to my senior year at the university, the previous president was graduating, and they asked me to be the president of this UX club. And I felt so underqualified. I was
Yeah.
like, why me? Like, I still don't even know if I can like explain what UX is.
And you were going to school for computer science. You weren't even
Yeah, I was
going
going
for
to school
design.
for computer science.
It says something a lot, though. It says something a lot either about you or about the curriculum in the program. I think it probably says a lot about you.
I was just passionate about this UX thing. I feel like I couldn't figure it out because I hadn't really met UX designers before. But yeah, like I was the most active attendant in this club. And so that created the opportunity for me to be the president. And that looked really good on my resume. I won't lie. Like, to be able to say in interviews, yeah, I was the president of the UX Design Association. I was also very active in my local design community. I started with that internship. Just all these things were opportunities I created myself. Like, no one asked me to create that mobile app. No one asked me to be involved in the design community. Those are things I just proactively did, and I translated those into experience. So when it came to that first job, the interviews, the resume, the portfolio, I could say I had experience even though no one hired me.
Yeah, I love that. You just a bunch of stuff that I think is worth worth highlighting here. I love when you talked about before reframing your past experience. And for me personally, I talk with a lot of career shifters, And for me, this is one of the biggest advantages I think that career shifters have over someone who's just starting out straight out of school is when you think about UX design. And this is, again, maybe I'm biased, but the entire show, my book, everything I do is related to, those additional soft skills. The hard skills are important, the craft is important, but those soft skills are going to be what helps you to excel in your career. And when I think about career shifters, I see very often those career shifters excelling much faster once they get a job than the junior designers with absolutely no professional experience before. And it's often because they've got experience dealing with people, communicating, influence, maybe leadership. Maybe they were leading teams in their last role, even if it wasn't UX design. Those interpersonal, office skills, those foundational skills are often there. And I think that's so important. If you've got a job, a previous role, you were doing something else and you're career shifting, that is such a big advantage that someone that is just coming out of school doesn't have. And I can't tell you how many times I've talked to people who were afraid to put their previous career on the resume or whatever. And I'm like, you just got to reframe it. You got to figure out how to talk about it. We've talked with chefs. I've talked with former chefs, former industrial designers, which I think there's a lot of overlap, architects, all these other things. There is so much that you can apply if you just think about it. And I think this is something where maybe I don't know if you have any thoughts here, but ChatGPT could be a really great way to just sort of list out your experience and have it kind of reframe it. Don't copy and paste or anything, but I think it's at least a great way to brainstorm and think of how you can discuss those things. So anyway, I don't know. I just love that reframing your past experience is so important.
An interview that still stands out in my mind that I had with an entry-level candidate, her previous role was a police dispatcher.
Oh, wow.
Meaning she's the person, here in the United States, when you have an emergency, you call 911. She was the one answering the phone. And she, you might be thinking what does that have to do with UX design? Well, she was able to tell the story of when you get a call from a distressed user, a distressed person, you have to get essential information. You have to help them calm down, clearly articulate the problem, clearly articulate the location. And she just explained how that experience as the police dispatcher helped her craft a better experience for these high intense scenarios. And that just completely stood out into my mind because there's a lot of obvious transition paths, as you mentioned, from another type of designer, like a graphic designer or an engineer or a business person. But you can go as far out like a police dispatcher, transitioning into UX design.
Yeah.
The intern I recently hired, she was a physical therapist. Once again, you're creating this experience for the people you're working with. And all of these individuals, they were able to communicate that skill set they had, those soft skills, those problem solving skills, creating those better experiences for the people they were serving in their previous roles. I'm a big believer you could come from any career path into UX design. You just have to be able to tell that story.
I love that. Now, here's the thing that I think a lot of people struggle with. It's making those connections, especially when they haven't had a UX role. It's often hard for them to make the connection between UX and their current role. And I think this is where the value of a really great mentor comes in. So I want to shift gears a little bit, talk about mentorship. Yeah. And I feel personally those are the kinds of things when you can have a conversation with someone, they can see from, an objective third party that can say, have you thought about how this connects? Have you thought about that? So I want to talk a little bit about mentorship from your perspective. And I'm curious, maybe your experience or maybe how you've gone about mentoring other people. But there's a lot to touch here on mentorship. But at a high level, I'm just curious the value that you see of a great mentor and how can they help get your foot in the door or help you in some way.
Yeah, I think mentorship is crucial. It's something I'm very passionate about. I actually led my local design community. I led a program that helped connect mentees to mentors.
Oh, nice.
We connected over 420 people seeking mentorship to over 180 volunteers as mentors. Something I'm very passionate about. because they can provide so much value and perspective. They're able to zoom out. And one of the most interesting things I've discovered, a lot of times when people think, like, I need a mentor, they're often thinking of someone
Mhm.
who's, a decade into their career, a design manager, a VP of design, some design leader. I've actually found some of the best mentors are someone who's just a few years ahead of you. Because the reality is, like, the market we're in today is so different than when I first became a designer. And people that are in these like elevated titles and positions and levels and deep into their career, they start to get so deep into that it's hard for them to remember and relate to those experiences when they were first joining. And so there can just be so much value of just talking to people who've already landed that first job, hearing about their experience, getting their wisdom and guidance. There's just incredible opportunity. The second thing I'll add is, I was talking about formal mentorship, like I'm a mentee, you're my mentor, let's connect.
Right.
The reality is 90% of my mentors don't know they were my mentor.
Right,
They're
right,
just people
exactly.
that I identified and followed. I sought out. Maybe I messaged them and asked a question. Some of them I've never even talked to face or in written communication. Like they
Mm.
don't even know I exist. And I just follow them, their journey, and they've inspired me. They've helped me identify a way forward through my career. And so the opportunities for mentorship are so abundant
Yeah.
and it's so valuable having that guidance.
Yeah, I love that you call that out. And this is something that like I struggle with too. I used to be on ADP list and I was on there for a long time.
Mm,
And I ended up not doing it anymore only because I just didn't have the time for it. But something that and this is not to fault ADP list. I don't think this is their fault specifically, but I think a lot of people will just default to a platform like that because it's easy. I can
mm,
quickly search, I can book through there and I can schedule a 30-minute call with somebody and they'll say I checked the box, I got my mentor. But like you said, the most valuable mentors that I've had in my life as well have been people that I've met. They might not even have been designers. They could have just been other people that I work with, other people that I
yeah.
know personally. It could be somebody I've met through a meetup or something, but that is such a valuable thing and like it's such a weird kind of dynamic too. Will you be my mentor?
Yeah.
It's like I don't know. I just find that those conversations that you have, those one-off ad hoc kind of things on a platform like ADP List, to me, they're good maybe to get insights here and there, but I don't think that's a replacement for what I would consider capital M mentors, like the
Yeah.
people that you're talking about that probably wouldn't even really know, like, oh, I'm the mentor, whatever. That's they're just friends, they're just people that you know. So I don't know. I just think that's worth calling out. It is the easy path to go on ADP List and find somebody, but I've seen so many people actually get to a point where they'll schedule so many meetings at ADP List, and of course, every designer has a different opinion. So they'll ask them about something like portfolio. They'll get 10, talk to 10 people and get 11 different opinions on what their portfolio should look like, and then they get confused, and then they don't move forward because they're stuck. They get paralysis of choice or whatever. You're right. And so I don't know. That's just something I've seen so many people do. you know, uh, I don't know.
That's the danger of those platforms. Like they are incredible resources. Like ADP list did not exist when I started. If I had
Yeah.
had
Right.
access to that,
Oh my
that would have
God.
been a game
Yeah.
changer for me. That being said, like it can be very transactional because it's like I'm the mentee, you're the mentor. Tell me what to do in 30 minutes. But yeah, to your point, like the most quality mentorship I found is through networking, relationships with others. And if I could give one piece of advice to designers, like don't just message strangers and ask, "Will you be my mentor?"
Yeah.
Like I've received those messages so many times on LinkedIn, and
Yeah.
it's the most intimidating thing because it's like I have no idea how you're defining mentor in this context. Like, are
Right.
you expecting me to set aside 5 hours of every week to like sit down with you? Like,
Right.
it's just so ambiguous. A much better way is just reach out to someone and say, "Hey, I saw your post about this," or I saw you speak at an event on this date. Make a connection, like something you said really stood out to me. I have a follow-up question. Ask
Mm-hmm.
the question. Like that right there is getting mentorship it's far more natural, it's far more comfortable. They're
Yeah.
far more likely to respond.
Yeah.
And then you're just going to start networking. You're going to start building a relationship. You're going to start receiving mentorship, even though they don't know you're thinking of them as a mentor.
So I love that you called out networking because that was actually, it leads me into the next section I want to talk about, which is for junior designers who don't have experience, the value of networking to help them land a role or make connections to at least get an interview or get their foot in the door. So you brought up, the random DMs on LinkedIn, which I think is funny when people, because I've had this happen actually several times on LinkedIn where
Right.
I get a random email from or in a LinkedIn message from somebody, and it turns out that it was an assignment for their boot camp to quote unquote network on LinkedIn. And I just find I'm like, God, this boot camp is just sending you down the wrong path. This is the wrong way to go about networking. But talk to me a little bit about networking. Like, what does that actually mean to you? Because a lot of people just assume networking, going on LinkedIn or networking, I have to go to a happy hour and, put on a name tag and awkward conversations for 45 minutes before I go home. What does networking mean to you? And what advice do you give junior designers when it comes to networking? You mentioned the LinkedIn bit, but what else is there?
Yeah. So early in my career, like networking was the scariest thing to me. 'Cause I didn't know what it meant. And to your point, I thought it was like going to a conference and awkwardly like going up to someone, shaking their hand, making a 30-second pitch,
Yeah.
and then like, oh, what do I say next? And a lot of people don't know this, but I'm actually very much an introvert. Like casual conversation, meeting people, like I have to put so much energy and effort into
Yeah.
that. I do it because it's important. I put myself out of my comfort zone. But something I've learned over the years is a lot of people think about networking of going out and trying to get value from other people,
Mm,
like going people and asking them questions, asking them to be your mentor. But I've flipped that paradigm in my head. I've changed or networking in my head to be more about what can I give to others.
I
And so I
love that.
mentioned
Yeah.
early on, like I was a very active participant in local design communities, one in my state, one at my university. I was constantly attending both of them, and I ended up becoming a volunteer in both of them. I was the
Wow.
president of that, of my university's BYU UX club. I also became a volunteer to help create a mentorship program for another local design community. But beyond that, I've also just been very proactive. Both of them had Slack channels. There's also online
Mm,
channels like LinkedIn. And I've
yeah.
just started becoming very proactive in sharing my thoughts, sharing my perspectives when people ask questions, as well as sharing my own questions, my own thoughts. And when you change that mindset to what can I give others? How can I be active and participate, volunteer, get involved? That's when networking becomes far more natural and you
Yeah.
build far more meaningful relationships. Through that volunteering, through that participation, I have made so many connections. And not the sense of like LinkedIn, oh, I connected with a person, we're a
Right. 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 Right.
connection, but like actual, I know their face, I know their name. We've had meaningful conversations. I know they'll reach out to me if I can help them, and I'll reach out to them. That in my mind is networking. It's not awkward, it's not weird. It's just putting yourself out there and trying to figure out how can I give value to others? And in return, you'll naturally receive that value, those referrals, those connections, that advice you need.
But yeah, I love that. And I think that's such an important reframe because so many people, like you said, they think it's going to these happy hours. But when you reframe it to I'm adding value or I'm helping people or I'm making friends or I'm just getting to know people personally, I mean, for me personally, that makes it so much easier than just like, I have to go
Yeah.
meet 10 people today and get 15 business cards or whatever, and I don't know. I just find that reciprocal give and take, I'm helping you and hopefully you'll help me at some point. It's such an important reframe. And, like I said, I went to LSU for business school, right? they talk about networking, and it's like, gotta wear your, your khakis and your polo shirt and your business casual stuff, and you go to these happy hours, and you get your name tag, and like that was my view of networking for a long time, and like I
Yeah.
just like hated it. I hated it so much. And so when you reframe it, I think that's so important. So when you talk about sharing and things like that, you mentioned Slack communities. This to me is like, I feel like something that's not talked about quite enough. People go to
Mm,
LinkedIn, they go to other places, but there are so many Slack channels out there where you're instantly connected to all of those people that belong on that Slack channel. It's not like LinkedIn where you have to go out and find them and add a connection before you can message them and all that stuff. You join a Slack channel, you're instantly connected to the hundreds of people that are there.
yeah.
And I think that's really important. I'm curious, you mentioned Slack. Are there any specific Slack channels that you know of for junior designers to join and network?
Yeah,
I'm
off
putting
the
you on the
top of
spot.
my head, I can't think of any that I would recommend to every designer. But like for if I talk to any designer in Utah, that's the state I'm in, I immediately have a go-to Slack channel, a go-to Discord community that I would recommend to them. The beauty of these Slack channels or Discord communities or whatever groups is they're typically narrow in focus. For example, the Discord community and Slack channel that I'm referencing, like both of them are local to the Utah designers. And that just immediately having that, I guess you could call it a constraint, a filter,
Hmm.
a limitation, is, instead of LinkedIn, X, Instagram, where it's like everyone in the world, it's immediately just a very tight niche group of people that share a common interest. They're a designer in your local community. Or if I'm talking to a UX researcher, like I can think of specific Slack channels for UX researchers. And that's what I love about these is when you join more tight-knit communities, you all share something in common. And that commonality just can create so many meaningful relationships. It can create so much meaningful dialogue. And that's what I recommend. Like, first, wherever you live, wherever you are, like do a little research. Figure out,
Hmm.
is there a local design scene? Are there meetups? Are there Slack channels? Are there Discord groups of just the people in your geographical area? Because that's where you can build some meaningful relationships, job opportunities,
Right.
and it'll just be a lot more focus on quality over quantity.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, and that's really great to talk about too, because I personally I'm not as introvert as most. I maybe would consider myself an extrovert. So the in-person things, I love going to those, and I love talking to people in real life. But you mentioned, being an introvert. I imagine that type of thing is very stressful. It's probably very draining. As an introvert, how do you feel about that versus the online community? Do you feel like the online community is a lot easier from an introvert's perspective to network versus having to be in person? Or do you feel like maybe every introvert's different, but do you feel like as an
Yeah.
introvert, those online communities are actually easier for you to get to know people?
Yeah, 100%. Like as an introvert, it's so much easier to just participate in Slack, participate in LinkedIn, Discord, wherever the groups are, wherever the people are. It is far more easier. That being said, I think it's important to have a variety. Like push yourself out of your comfort zone. Honestly, my quest to find these groups, like I joined over 20 different Slack communities because I was just trying to find one that was active, that was relevant, that wasn't spammy. A lot of them are
Right.
just, they turn into these massive groups, and then everyone's just like advertising, and you lose that community spirit. Yeah, as you go through, you just start to find ones that really click with you. I know you and I are part of another one that's, very tight and intimate that I really love as well, that shares a common interest. And yeah, it's just so much easier. It's so much more approachable. Also be willing, try out both in person and online. There's pros and cons to each. I think it's good to have a healthy mix of both,
Yeah,
regardless if
absolutely.
you're an introvert or an extrovert.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things too, there's, certainly something to be said for in person when you're in a big city, right? So you're in New York, you've probably got tons of meetups. If you're in Austin, tons of meetups. Obviously, San Francisco, Seattle, even but I would say even if you're in like, you know, for instance, Tulsa, Oklahoma, tiny, like little small market, there's still UX meetups there. I know people there that are active in the UX community. And so just because you aren't in a big city doesn't mean you don't have that. You know, if you happen to live in a
Yeah.
rural area, probably not a live in-person meetup, but you know, you could still take advantage of those remote. But yeah, I think that's such an important thing. And then when you think about, you know, let's talk a little bit about the benefits of networking for the job hunt, because as you network, you're meeting people, you know, you get sort of maybe referrals, things like that. From your perspective and stuff like that, I'm curious, how does that impact? And let's actually think about it from a hiring manager's perspective, because you
Yeah.
were recently hiring junior designers, interns, things like that. How important were those referrals for you when you made that decision? I'm
Yeah.
curious.
Referrals, I cannot overemphasize the power of referrals. Anytime my team gets a referral, we make sure we look at it very closely because usually it's coming from an internal employee or someone I trust, and they are vouching for an individual, which immediately just passes so many filters of, okay, I know this is someone that someone else can vouch for. I know they're human and not a robot. And I want to do my due diligence so I can confidently tell that person yes or no. To the person that's referring that person, I want to make sure I, live at the end of the relationship. That's not saying like we still look at every single resume, every single portfolio when people apply,
Yeah.
but we'll always start with the referrals. We'll always, we'll follow up with that person like, well, why are you referring to this person? Can you give me a little more background? Because those testimonials, that insider perspective is so valuable when you're evaluating 500 strangers applying to your role. And so there is tremendous value from that.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, and I actually know that there are certain incentives as well for getting a referral, depending on the
Yeah.
company. Not every company does this. My old company, for instance, I would get $1,000 if that person that I referred got a job. So there's an incentive there for me to send a referral. But also, too, I mean, they have to get the job. But then also, too, there are other companies where there's an incentive for the applicant where, you know, I know of several where you're essentially guaranteed a phone screen at the
Mm,
very least, right? Which is more than I think most people who just submit a random cold application on LinkedIn ever get. And so I think that's something to think about. And I'm curious when you thinking about this, I don't know if you can get into specifics, but the recent roles that you hired for,
yeah.
can you talk a little bit about the numbers of applicants that you received? And I know you mentioned you looked through all of the resumes. I'm just curious how, you know, thinking about let's actually think about the junior designers. You probably got a lot of applicants. I'm assuming. Is that accurate to say?
Yes, I
Can
can
you
give
talk
you the
about the
number
specific? Oh, wow. Okay.
402. That's how
Holy crap.
many people applied to our summer internship role.
And that was one internship or multiple? A single one. Okay. And that's pretty. I think that's pretty common. Would you agree? Like
Yes.
even just across the board, I've heard of similar numbers and maybe even higher for other junior and maybe senior designer roles. So I'm curious when you think about these designers who have no personal or professional experience and they are putting what are some ways that you as a hiring manager look to the case studies, portfolios to evaluate whether or not this person is worth talking to further?
Yeah. That is a crucial question because I see so many people, they're frustrated by, it was rejected and I didn't even have the opportunity to have a dialogue. And I think everyone agrees like one of the most successful ways to evaluate someone is through a dialogue, through a conversation. I wholeheartedly agree with that sentiment. But when you get 400 plus applications to a single role, you can't schedule 400 interviews.
Who's
It's
got time
just
for that?
not feasible. It's not realistic. And so every hiring manager, every recruiter and company, they have to filter it down. They have to figure out, without having a conversation or dialogue, how are we going to, hopefully in an unbiased manner, evaluate these 400 candidates and figure out which ones we will have the dialogue with. We will extend that first conversation or interview. And so some of the key tools that I'm able to evaluate as a hiring manager, and we look at the application, we look at the resume, we look at the portfolio, and then if there's a referral attached, that's kind of a fourth data point that we evaluate. But the two key ones are really that resume and that portfolio. And that's just the only way we're able to asynchronously, without scheduling an interview, evaluate the potential match for this candidate, if they are a potential match for the role. Now, the reality is, out of 400 candidates, a lot of them are going to be potential matches based off their
Right,
resume and
right.
portfolio. So then we have to further narrow it down of, okay, not only are they a potential match, but which ones are the top matches? Which ones demonstrate the top potential? And so we have to narrow it down from those 400 candidates to, might be 20 or 30 potential top matches. And then out of those 20 to 30, we have to figure out which ones are we extending that first interview to, and
Yeah.
what's our capacity? How many people can we interview? And so really a lot of it comes down to that resume, to that portfolio. You have to make a strong impression through your storytelling, through your communication in those different career assets.
Okay, so this is the question. I'm curious, and again, I know that you're one hiring manager. This is one data point. Another hiring manager probably has a different set of
Yep.
criteria. But do you have a rubric or criteria for what makes someone worthy of that next step? Is there
Yeah.
something, maybe actually a better way to say this is the things that maybe the red flags that caused you to not move them to the next step? That might be easier to answer. Was there, could you speak to that perhaps? Things that maybe you saw, pitfalls that you saw people doing in resumes, portfolios, case studies, thinking about those interns or junior designers without professional experience that they did that caused them to sort of, that was the end of the line.
Yeah. It's this is such a tricky question because during my career, like I've been a hiring manager. I've been on the side where I'm hiring, evaluating candidates. I also do a lot of career coaching and mentorship. And it's funny because the answers I give as a hiring manager versus the answers I give as a career coach are sort of different.
Interesting. Okay.
And it's this conflicting viewpoint. For example, as a career coach, I know the exact, I mean, I don't want to claim like the exact things, but I have seen tremendous success in very specific things an applicant can do to level up their resume and portfolio to land that first job. And some of it is playing into human bias. For example, a lot of people are probably aware of visual perception bias. Even if you're a researcher or applying for a role where maybe UI design and visual design isn't as crucial to that role, but if you present a very visually polished resume and portfolio, that is going to play into the bias of human minds. And because your visual skills are stronger, recruiters, hiring managers, whoever is evaluating you, they'll just naturally assume the rest of your skills are also elevated, which, doesn't make sense. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
visual design's not research,
Right.
and yet it's a common human bias. Like, if you're going to go on Zillow and buy a home and you see this beautiful home of beautiful photography, you're going to perceive it as being more
Mm-hmm.
valuable.
Yeah.
Even if that home has like foundational issues with the structure. But meanwhile, if you look at another home where someone just took their own photos on their iPhone, poor lighting, poor furniture arrangement, you're going to evaluate that home as being less
Yeah.
valuable, even though you're not buying the home for the photographer's skills or the furniture arrangement. And so, from the career coaching side, there's very specific things like that I coach people on. Hey, make these tweaks and improvements here, you will stand out. Now, when we flip over to the hiring manager side, I'm very aware and cognizant of those biases, of those things of
Right.
I need to be unbiased here. Just because someone is an amazing visual designer doesn't necessarily mean, that's one of the skills in the job description. I'm also looking for the 10 other skills. And so as a hiring manager, we do have we have a career architecture guide. It's the same one we use with our designers for promotions, for evaluating, are you junior, are
Okay.
you senior, what are the skills and expectations? And we use that same rubric when evaluating candidates
Wow. Okay.
because, if they're going to enter into a role, they should have those same core skills. And that's what we're looking for in the resume, the portfolio, the interviews, the process. And we're constantly trying to improve that. We're trying to remove bias. We're trying to be more objective. And so it's so tricky answering that question because as a hiring manager, like I'm constantly fighting the natural human bias in my head.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
As a
Yeah.
career coach, though, I'm saying go all in on these three things. And I have seen it land people jobs. I've seen it help people get more opportunities.
Yeah. I love that you call that out. And I love that you're aware of these things. And I think it's worth noting that, and this is maybe sad to say, that I don't know, 80-20 rule, maybe I'm going to go out on a limb and say, 80% of hiring managers are not Mitch. And they are not debiasing, and they don't have these career architecture guides, which I love that you guys have, by the way. That's got to be really nice for people to help plan their career. But I would say, like, to your point, if we're giving general advice, there's a reason why we say don't judge a book by its cover. It's because people always tend to judge a book by its cover. And so, if you're going to be hiring or if you're going to be applying and trying to get a job, and you have to be aware that people will absolutely, without a doubt, be judging you on criteria that isn't necessarily fair. And I think that's really important to highlight. I think it's worth noting as well that when it comes to things like portfolios, maybe even resumes, there is no shame in finding a template that looks nice and using that.
Yeah.
You're not getting a job to design websites and resumes. You are getting a job to do UX work, which is not the same. There is no reason to start from scratch. And I would say, and Adam, maybe you've seen this, I'm curious what your thoughts are. I'm amazed by the amount of people who feel like they can't start off with a template and then customize it and modify it. And the ones that don't, it is painfully obvious that they have attempted to, and especially as a junior designer with no experience, it is painfully obvious that they have started from scratch because they were quote unquote trying to be original. And I'm curious, is that something you've seen? Is that something that you've noticed?
That is absolutely something I have seen. And when I coach people, that's what I often tell them. Like, we live in a day and age where it's never been easier to create a professional, polished website without knowing how to code. Like, I remember when I first entered the industry, I was agonizing, am I going to code this myself? Or am I going to be stuck with one of these template tools that I can't fully customize and own? But there are so many tools today, like Wix Studio, like Framer.
Shout out to Wix, sponsor Wix.
Yes, like they are fantastic tools. They've made it so easy. Both of them, you can import Figma files and use that as a base for your designs, make it responsive. But both of them also have all these incredible templates that you can use as a baseline. And you can very quickly have a polished presence. And then what really matters is, the danger of templates is people start to kind of fall in these like cookie cutter portfolios. They're like, okay, the template dictates it this way, and now I'm going to copy what everyone else is doing. It's like use the templates as a baseline, but what that won't replace is your unique value proposition, your storytelling.
Yeah.
Like, don't use the lorem ipsum text in those templates.
Yes. Okay. So to reframe my advice, use the templates for line height, typography rules, letter spacing in general, maybe colors, things like that. For things that you wouldn't necessarily be doing as UX designer, do not copy other people's portfolios and the way they formatted their case studies necessarily. What I mean, and I'm glad you pointed this out, is use the template for the visual design aspect, the typography, colors, spacing, things like that. And there is no reason why you have to come up with that, especially if you're not trained as a graphic designer. That's a very different skill set. So I think that is perfect excellent thing to call out. I'm glad you call that out because, yeah, I don't want anybody to misunderstand when I say that.
Yeah.
Copy someone else's case study. I
No,
think
no worries.
that's really awesome. Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about case studies and portfolios. For somebody who has no experience, what are some ways that they can create a case study without that experience? You mentioned before volunteering, you created your own, application, you created your own app, kind of a passion project. What are some ways that people can get that work into a case study without actual experience from your perspective?
Yeah, so once again, this goes back to you're going to have to create your own experience, create your own opportunities. And there are infinite ways to do this. I think a core skill of UX designers is to be curious. Constantly be curious, observe the world around you, identify the problems, the pain points, the just things that haven't been solved around you, whether that's in existing apps or websites or platforms, or maybe it's just your local, mom and pop shop. They don't have a website. They could use a website to build their brand and their business and their reputation. You might just identify opportunities of, I wish there was an app for X, or I wish there was a better solution for Y. If you are curious, like I get flooded every day of my life. I'm just seeing all these missed opportunities. Whether I'm buying clothing, I'm shopping online, I'm waiting for a bus, I'm just constantly thinking, how could this been optimized? Waiting in the line for Disneyland. Like, there's just infinite experiences around all of us. Each of them is an opportunity. And if you think about those opportunities, you can turn any of those into an opportunity for you to get experience. You can explain, oh, how did you identify this problem? How did you validate it's not just you? Like other people experience the same frustration, the same constraint, and then start ideating on a solution, start figuring out, and it doesn't have to be a mobile app or website. I think as
Yeah,
UX
I love
designers,
that.
we
Yeah.
often
Yeah.
fall into that.
Yeah.
And granted, the majority of the roles want to see, you're going to work there building an app or a website. But if you can just be curious, start applying your skill set. How would you solve that problem? A real world problem with a real world solution. And try to go as far as actually building that solution. Go partner with people to help bring it to reality or create the best prototype you can. Go validate it, go test it. And then all of that can turn into a case study. It can turn into a story you can tell in the interview process. And there are just infinite opportunities around us. And that's exactly what I did when I built that mobile app. I didn't just think, oh, we need another dog walking app or we need another food delivery app. Like
Yep.
the
Yep.
reality is that problem has been solved 100 times. My solution's likely not going to be better than the existing solutions. But there are so many problems out there, especially when you look at like government websites or industries not known for design. There are just so many opportunities that no one has touched, that no one is designing solutions for. And you can bring a unique perspective there and translate that into experience.
Yeah, I love that. And this is something that I see a lot as well is the dog you call it the dog walking app. I always pick on the dog walking app. I think it's everybody's favorite scapegoat or whatever. I don't know there's a right word for that. Anyway, yeah, everybody picks on the dog walking app, and I think there's a reason for that. Is everybody has it, and you end up having exactly the same ideas as everybody else. But I want to highlight what you did. You went and you found a problem and you solved it. And the beautiful thing there is it wasn't just a random problem. It was something that you were passionate about.
Yes.
So when you're going and explaining it, and obviously you got to get past these first phases to get into the hiring panel and present the work, but when you're presenting that work, you're more passionate about it, and that passion, hopefully, in theory, would shine through as you're explaining it. And I would imagine if it's a problem that you've experienced firsthand and you're passionate about, you're going to explain that much better. You're going to find a way to be more, emphatic about it than just, the dog walking app that you redesigned that everybody else has. And so I think that's something really interesting is thinking about things that you're passionate about, solving that. The other thing that the pitfall that I often see with a lot of these people who have zero experience, they make up a problem. The problem comes into when they go to come up with the solution to actually implement it. It's there are no constraints essentially. So, they're designing blue sky, anything is possible, when in reality, that comes into this real world experience. So how do you get this real world experience? But working with engineers, understanding constraints. We didn't have the budget. We didn't have the time. We didn't have the resources, whatever it was. We couldn't do, that amazing thing that you could do, in a real world scenario, you could. And I'm curious, is there a way for a person with no experience to think through these things so that they aren't designing, I don't know, the teleporters from Star Trek or something? It was, oh, we'll just teleport there. Yeah, we solved the problem. But, obviously you can't do that. So I'm curious, is there some way that you have helped guide junior designers or these hopeful designers to not fall for that trap?
Yeah, my biggest recommendation is take on the entrepreneurial mindset. A lot of people love the show Shark Tank, where these entrepreneurs, most of them, it starts as a hobby. They realize there's a business opportunity. Other people have the same problem. They go pitch this solution to people. They explain the problem, the solution, ask them to invest in it. Like, you don't have to go that far, but to your point, try to apply actual constraints. For example, far too often, the other one and dog walking apps, like people redesign food delivery apps. They say, look at this amazing food delivery app. The immediate question that goes in my mind as a hiring manager is, how are you going to convince all those restaurants to put their services on your app? Like,
Right.
where's that data coming from?
Right.
You designed a nice looking UI, a user interface, but I still feel like you haven't solved the problem though. Like, are you just going to walk into McDonald's and every restaurant and say, hey, you should partner in my app and put your details in here and be compatible with this? Like, that is the real challenge. That's the real problem. And that's going to be incredibly difficult to solve unless you're Uber or DoorDash or Uber Eats, whatever. And really think through, how am I going to solve this comprehensive problem, the ecosystem? How do I convince people and vendors and users to adopt the solution? It's that thinking process that I want to see as a hiring manager. You didn't just talk to some people, oh, they have a problem. I went in Figma, designed a user interface. This is the solution.
Right.
I want to know that's just one piece of the solution. That's the tip of the iceberg. How are you solving beneath the iceberg, the deeper problem, the systems, the people? How are you going to approach and solve that? That's what I want to see. And that's the mindset I think these early career designers need to apply, because no matter where you go, that business is going to have constraints. There's reasons they can't just create a polished UI and bring it into reality. There's developer staffing, constraints. There's technology constraints. There's data access constraints. If you can show how you think through constraints, that is golden. That is valuable.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, this reminds me of a while back, I was working with a boot camp student who was crafting a case study. And she had this idea that, she had kids and she's having trouble with, and summer camps and booking summer camps, right? Because I don't know if you're familiar with this. Where I live, it's very similar. Every week it's a different summer camp. I have to schedule the summer camps. I have to figure out what the dates are. I have to book them somehow. Different payment platforms, different payment gateways, whatever. The websites are all over the place. And so her idea was, I'm going to create an app where I can just search for all the summer camps and just book everything right there. And it's like, you could design that interface and I'm sure it'll look great. But when you present that and someone asks you, where'd that data come from? What are you going to say? The answer is there is no data. There is no API. And most of these are little mom and pop summer camps. So instead of doing that, what if you created this other thing? What if you had resources with reviews and community-driven reviews and photos and things like that. And then you could maybe have ad space where people could pay to advertise their camp or whatever. And so the beautiful thing there is once you go in a hiring panel, you could even say, or in your case study, originally we set out to do this, but realized we couldn't. We ran into this constraint, and talk about that and own it. And then that helps drive your next decision. And I think that's the thing that, a lot of junior designers or these, pre-junior designers fall into, assuming I'm just going to design the interface and that's UX. That's certainly part of it, but you're missing the whole part of it that makes the app actually useful to begin with. So I love that you call that out, and I think that's a wonderful example of how to think about constraints so that when you are presenting your work, you're not like this naive little like bushy-eyed, like, oh, it's just beautiful interface, but whatever. And a hiring panel's like, this is ridiculous. Like there's no way this would have been built. You're silly to even have suggested it. So anyway, I love that. All right, Mitch, so we've had you for a little while. Before we get out of here, So we've had you for a little while. Before we get out of here, I got some questions that I like to ask all my guests to help our listeners get to know our guests a little bit better. Before we do that, anything that we're missing, anything we didn't get a chance to talk about that you want these fledgling designers to know about getting experience before they get the job that we didn't cover today?
Yeah, the biggest takeaway I could share is if you're listening to this podcast and you might be feeling overwhelmed. You might be feeling, wow, there's so much I have to do. This really is an important moment to reflect. Is this the career path you want to pursue? It's not easy. It's not I go to the boot camp, I get my certificate, I get the job. It's not a checklist path. It's going to take a lot of energy, a lot of dedication, and some risk. Now, if you are passionate about UX design, you're passionate about the discipline, the skill set, the problem solving, the collaboration, then instead of seeing this as intimidating, you're probably going to see this of like, okay, I'm going to channel this passion and energy into doing that. Those are typically the people I see that make it, is they're passionate. They really love this discipline. They love this work. In some cases, they're doing it for fun. Like when I was building that 100-hour app project, 100 hours is a lot of time, but I enjoyed that 100 hours. I was having fun. It was fulfilling, and that will propel you forward. It is going to be a grind if you're not truly passionate. And I'm not saying you can't make it if you're not passionate, but once again, it is difficult to break into. So you need that motivation. You need that energy and desire, and that will pull you through. So it's really important to just kind of take a step back and really evaluate, am I committed? Because if you're going to be casual about this, it's going to be really challenging to stand out to those 400 other people applying for the same role.
I love it. And you called out something a couple times while we were talking. I think it's worth just highlighting one more time at the end is you've got to own your career. You've got to figure out what you need to do to get the experience or show the experience or tell the story about the experience, whatever it is. Nobody is going to do that for you. And you cannot rely on a mentor, friends, colleagues, whatever, at any stage in your career, whether you're just starting out or you're an executive. You have got to own your career and be responsible for yourself, and nobody is going to do that for you. I think you called that out, and I want to re-highlight that because I think that is so important. All right, Mitch. So like I said, we've got those questions. We're going to ask, help everybody get to know you a little bit better. Before we do that, one more time, let's give our live event one more plug. October 25th. That's a Thursday. 11 Eastern, we're going to be hanging out, answering all your burning questions about getting experience before you have the job. Mitch, one more time, what do you want people to ask you when we get there live? What's some things you want people to talk about?
I think, quick correction, October 25th will be a Friday. So
what'd I say?
I think you said Thursday. Just wanted to make sure people aren't confused there.
Let me fix that. This is the beauty of post-production. We can fix that. All right, let's see. All right, Mitch. So I've got some questions to ask before we get out of here to help all our listeners get to know you a little bit better. But before we do that, let's give our live event one more plug. That's Friday, October 25th, 11 Eastern. We're going to be hanging out on LinkedIn and YouTube. And before we hold on, what was I going to say? We're going to be hanging out on LinkedIn and YouTube. You can check out beyonduxdesign.com/events for all the proper links. But before we hop in those questions, what's some things that you want people to bring up, some questions you want them to submit ahead of time? What are some things you want to talk about?
Yeah, I'm happy to talk about anything related to helping people get that first job in their career. We can talk about resumes, we can talk about portfolios. I know we've already talked about networking, mentorship on the show, how to get experience. I found with these high level subjects, there's often a lot of, well, what about my scenario? What
Yeah,
about this
exactly.
scenario? What
I'm a
about
unique
MBA?
snowflake.
Yes. And so there's a lot of specifics to talk through. I'm happy to go through all of those. I'll admit, I feel like it's rare to find like unique new questions because everyone has the same questions all the time. But if you do think you have a unique one, like happy to chat through it. I'm here to help you.
Well, the beautiful thing about these young designers, Mitch, is they often don't bother Googling it first. So the chances are good they haven't found that question before. So we'll probably get a ton of questions. But we do need to fill an hour. So if you have questions, submit those questions, beyonduxdesign.com/events, and we'll get those questions answered. All right, Mitch, first up, all right, Mitch, are you ready to answer some silly little questions
Absolutely.
to help our listeners
Let's
get to know a
do
little bit
it.
better? All right. First thing that comes to your mind, you don't have to think too hard about it. First up, what is your favorite non-design book?
This is going to be a funny answer, but I'm going to say Goodnight Gorilla. It's a children's book I read with my 2-year-old almost every night. Is the silliest little book, but my little girl loves it. She giggles every time. So I'm just going to throw that out there. Goodnight Gorilla.
Do you do like the voices? Do you do character voices when you're reading to your kids?
There's really not that many voices in the book. It's a lot of it is in the art. Like every page has a hidden banana peel.
Awesome.
My little girl's like, banana, banana.
I love it, man. I love reading like books to my kids. My kids are 6 and 8, so we're past like some of the kids' books. But I used to love reading like Dr. Seuss and stuff. You know, like just like
you make
getting
the
into
sound effects in there and things, so that's always fun. And he turns the pages, so that's my favorite non-design book right now.
I love it, dude. Yeah, one I used to love was like Fox and Socks, and it's like just crazy rhyming. It's like a tongue twister. It's like really hard to read. I love it. All right, what is your favorite non-design podcast?
Ooh, non-design podcasts.
Not Beyond UX. Any other?
What was that?
I said not Beyond UX. Anyway.
I'm gonna say Shift Your Day Job by Brittany Cates. So Brittany is one of my designers. She started as an intern. Went full time. She's an incredible designer. Her podcast is actually targeted towards women who, kind of similar to what we've been talking to, shift their career, make a career transition. So I'm not even the primary audience for that podcast. I have the privilege of being on a UX team where more than 2/3 of the members are women. And that's rare to find in the tech industry. Like these are all incredible and remarkable women, and a lot of them have been interviewed on this podcast as well as others. Each has such an incredible story, incredible challenges in their journey. It's not necessarily about, some of them did transition to UX design, but others have made other career transitions. I think it's so inspiring, the journey that minority groups go through or that women in tech go through. So even though I'm not the target audience, it is just so inspiring listening to those stories.
Right on. I love that, man. I've never heard of her podcast, but I definitely will check it out, and I'm happy to promote it. Shift Your Day Job. Check it out wherever you listen to podcasts, I assume. That's awesome, man. I'm going to have to check it out. All right. What is your favorite meal? This could be something you've cooked, something your grandma used to cook, something you had at a restaurant.
I'll say my wife's chicken Alfredo pasta bake. Ooh. Like that is number one. A close number two is homemade pizza pretzels. Those are
pizza
just
pretzels. What is that? What is a pizza pretzel?
Yeah, it's kind of imagine like a calzone or a breadstick with pizza dough, and then you stuff the inside with your pizza toppings, your tomato sauce, your pepperoni, your olive.
Okay.
And then she takes it and twists it into the shape of a pretzel and puts it in the oven.
Okay. That is so cool. That's awesome. So it's like rolled. So it's like flat. You roll it into a tube essentially, and then flip it like a pretzel.
Yep. Just like that.
That is so cool. I've never heard of that before.
It's taken a while to perfect, but she does an amazing job.
Oh my God, I have to check that out. Did she make that up or did she find a recipe? I've never heard of that before.
One random night, like early when we were like newlyweds, one random night's like, you know what sounds really good? Pizza pretzels. Now, there's a lot of places where you can get like a thick pretzel and you dip it in tomato sauce. But I was just wondering, like, what if it was like a calzone where the toppings are inside? And she was like, I can figure that out. So did
I
some
love it.
Googling, did some experimentation, but it's become a personal favorite.
I've never heard of that before. I love it. I love that, dude. All right. So what is your favorite vacation spot?
Hmm. Say most consistent one for my family. We have a family cabin up in the woods near here, Heber, Utah. It's a beautiful place, an introvert's paradise. Just out in the woods, away from everyone and everything. Just a beautiful place to go retreat to and relax.
Dude, oh, that's so cool. Is that like a family cabin or do you guys own
Yeah,
it?
it's a
Just y'all?
family
Oh, okay.
cabin, so feel very blessed and lucky to have
Yeah,
that
dude.
opportunity.
Oh man, I love that. Yeah, my family does not have any cabins or vacation properties. Like next, not reincarnated. I'm coming back with like a family that has like some kind of vacation property. All right, what is your favorite design tool that is not Figma?
Good question. Off the top, can I choose two?
Yeah, sure, why not? It's my show. I do what I want.
At the top, what comes to top of mind is first, I am a huge fan of Framer. It really has, it's just an amazing tool. Essentially is Figma, but you can publish a website. And it has just enabled me to create so many incredible websites and experiences. And so that is my favorite design tool. If I were to pick a non-design tool, I'm going to say Notion. I started
Oh yeah.
adopting Notion maybe towards the beginning of this year, and my whole life is moving into Notion. From the sushi I order to my one-on-ones
Oh
with
wow.
designers, it
Yeah.
is just my whole life is elevated and organized.
I love it, dude. I use Notion for like all of my stuff too, and it's amazing. I just love that it's like a database. I can query things, I can mix and match and rearrange views. I use it for Beyond UX. I use it for my cognition catalog. I use it for work. I use it for like all this stuff. Notion is an amazing, amazing tool. Cool. All right, Mitch. Well, it has been amazing having you on. Really excited to have you as episode 100. I'm so excited, episode 100. Before we get out of here, tell everybody where they can find you, your coaching, LinkedIn, obviously, all that stuff. Give yourself a little plug. Let everyone know where they can find you.
Yeah, I'm most active on LinkedIn, so feel free to look me up on there. That's where I share the majority of my thoughts and have all my links on there. I also have my personal website, mitchellclements.com. Do a lot of career coaching, mentorship, portfolio reviews, all from the perspective of a hiring manager. And so those are the two places I'm the most active.
All that stuff in the show notes. And again, one more time, October 25th, that's a Friday, 11 Eastern. Join us, beyonduxdesign.com/events. Get your questions in early. Join us on LinkedIn and YouTube. It's going to be a dang old hoot. Mitch, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it, man.
Absolutely. Thank you.